thank you so much for joining us for this month's coffee chat. We are excited to welcome you once again to this, raw conversation that we have every month. And we're looking forward to unpacking some of the updates that Abby shared this month. On November's updates from Binboyat. So Avi, jumping right into the questions that I've prepared for you, what are you most proud of what Binboyat has done in November?
Yeah, November's been an exciting month. It's also been a really busy month. I think the biggest thing that was kind of a big highlight was just last weekend. Actually, on Friday, we had the graduation ceremony for care training. Every year that's like our most exciting moment. And once again, it was kind of a really, heartwarming moment. For the last couple of years, we've gotten used to these being hosted online. And so it's not as physically energetic the way it usually is when you're in the same area and there's like a lot of hugs and there's like these certificates then exchange hands and all of that momentum that's there. But honestly, even for a virtual program, I thought it went really well. The producers gave a lot of feedback, which is really awesome because it's not just like a celebration moment, but we actually do a 2-hour session. And in the first hour, we host these smaller sessions where producers talk about the structure, the methodology, the curriculum that really helps us inform our program for next year and in the future. So that was really nice. And then obviously the graduation piece is a bit more like a traditional kind of speeches from different guests, and Sangi, you spoke really beautifully as well. And I think everyone just like was very optimistic and energetic and very excited for what's next for some of our producers that graduated. We finished the graduation with about 202 producers that have completed this program. And the focus for this year was climate change adaptation and gender. And I think every speaker and a lot of the producers talked about the importance of that issue and how we are able to provide these kind of bite-sized curriculum materials for our producers. So I feel really proud that this is a very relevant issue that we're really tackling, and glad that we're able to provide a more human-centered and smallholder women-centered programming. So that was something that I've been really excited about and proud about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can 100% echo that. And I think it was Saturday morning, my time. And I just remember being like, oh my God, this is like the best way to start any weekend. And just really proud of like the work that everyone on our team has done, from facilitators all the way to like our board. That's been, a crucial part of the work that we've done. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think one thing that I've also noticed in the newsletter this month has been that you switched, from our focus on sharing challenges and being really open about what we are going through to sharing a little bit more about what you're grateful for. And I think you shared two elements or two areas of gratitude, and that was really touching, I'll say. And I definitely share that sentiment with you. And I think for all of us, and probably for those of us who might be interested in this, I would like to ask this question on their behalf is, what are you, that update has been like what you're grateful for and what we are grateful for as an organization, but what are you personally grateful for this today or this month?
For sure. Honestly speaking, I think in days like these, and I'm now based in Europe and it's really cold. So really kind of going micro, I think something that I'm really grateful for is like socks. Like socks are so nice to have in winter time. And I think waking up in really cold weather, it can be such a nice thing to like put on and then be like, okay, I'm not as cold as I was. So on a very micro level, and quite seriously, I think socks are something that I'm really, really grateful for. More kind of macro, and I think just generally, I feel quite grateful to be able to do the different types of things that I do that really like that never tire me. And I say that not lightly because I know there are people that don't necessarily have the same opportunities and privileges me to just pursue their passion. And I feel like every single day I wake up and I'm like really, really excited about what I have in front of me. And sometimes it feels difficult. Sometimes it feels kind of nerve-wracking, like, oh, can I actually do it? And oftentimes it requires a lot of courage, and I'm not necessarily always the most courageous person. And yet every single day, at the end of the day, I feel like I've done my best. And yeah, never wake up and look at the mirror and ask myself one of those questions about like, this is what I want to do. Like, that's a question that hasn't been around for many, many years. And so I think I just feel really grateful that I do have a career where I feel like I'm enjoying the fullest, and there's no, I'm sure things will change in the future for sure, but for now, I'm very grateful to have that career.
Oh, that's really sweet. And I think it's sweet in a way that it's not like, in a demeaning way or anything, but it's quite inspiring, and how vocalize how you feel about, like, waking up every day and feeling about the work that you do. And I think that's something that I have been super inspired by you, especially like knowing how much you handle on a daily basis. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Moving a little bit, moving us ahead a little bit on what you asked for in this newsletter. And I think today is a special day. It's Giving Tuesday, and I think a lot of us, a lot of you watching this are aware of what Giving Tuesday means. And I don't think there is a need for us to then explain what Giving Tuesday is, but it's also one of our first efforts to celebrate it, I think, at Pin Voyage, right? I think we've in the past have individually and more privately asked for support to our mentors and people in our network, but I don't think we've done it as like a fixed day of the year, and we've never really participated in it, but we decided to do so this year, right? And I think a lot of it has been thanks to you and Deborah, our board members' leadership on it. So can you tell us a little bit more about how people who are watching this and people who want to support Bin Voyage can actually participate in this year's Giving Tuesday, and maybe beyond this specific day?
For sure. So for anyone that's looking to get involved, and we're going to put like a little link down here, it's beanvoyage.org/give. It's quite simple. So if you want to give to Bean Voyage, just go to beanvoyage.org/give. You're able to be part of our program in a multitude of ways. One of the things that we're introducing this year and kind of up to next year as well is this kind of campaign that's actually launching in this time, and it's launching today, but it's actually going to be lasting for about 2 months, where we're going to try to really work with multitudes of different partners, their foundations, individuals, trying to really leverage network and our work so far to leverage more funding for the organization to launch more effective and more impactful programs in 2022. One of our biggest objectives next year is to become more impactful with our programming and to become a more prosperous organization. And all of that will happen, will succeed and happen, I think, primarily because we're able to raise the funding to be able to actually afford it. So this year's Giving Month is really crucial for us to be able to meet some of these targets. Having said that, we're also aware that it's a tough time of the year. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I love this organization and I would love to support, but maybe I can't right now, that is completely okay. We know that you've supported us in the past and will continue to support us in different ways. So if you can give, wonderful. As little as $10 is awesome, and we really will be grateful to you and for your generosity. If you can't give, you can forward this video to a few people in your network that might learn about our work, and that is equally, if not more better than giving yourself. So we hope you'll want to get involved. We'll put the link again. It's beanvoyage.org/give, and you can join us for as little as $10 a month. One of the kind of perks of this program that we're introducing is that once you join our program, we call this the Voyager program. So you become one of the Voyagers of Bean Voyage. And basically it involves a few different elements that we actually provide. So we send out monthly updates similar to the ones that you're reading, where you get to learn more about our programs and how they're working throughout the year. You actually get to watch some more inside the scene videos of how we go about developing projects and what works well, what's been challenging, kind of like regular vlogs around those issues. And then you also get a full kind of fledged report. And so we publish these midterm and end of the term report on every single program, and you will be able to actually see the progress of the different projects that we run at Bean Voyage. So go to the platform, you'll be able to see all of that. There are examples of it as well. And we hope you will continue to join us this Giving Tuesday.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you also for reading this initiative. And now to your personal note. And I think this one was more of the lengthy one that you share, because I think you usually write quite succinct one, and I actually really enjoyed reading it. And it was divided into, I think, two segments and two, I'm assuming, two thread of thoughts that you're currently having. And the first part was about tokenism and how you were reflecting on this conversation that you were having with someone that you recently met, and how the person has, spelled out things that I think we've already talked about around not mistaking access with influence. And I wanted to hear more of that from you, and see what you have been thinking about on that thread of thoughts, if there's anything that you wanted to unpack there.
For sure. I think the thing, and this is the piece that I wasn't able to write as much because of the spacing requirement, but I was thinking a lot about how the last year and a half, or like almost 2 years now, people have talked a lot about how, because of COVID, a lot more things are becoming accessible for people around the world, and primarily because of digitalization, right? Like everyone has a cell phone, everyone has, again, I say that not lightly. I know that not everyone does, but the access is improving. And what that means is that, conferences are more accessible. You and I have done more speaking in the last 2 years in virtual conferences than we ever did before, in the prior years before, when events were happening in person, right? And so, yes, in terms of access to events and rooms, and we've talked to government officials, we've talked to celebrities this past year. Like, there's been some real interesting rooms where we found ourselves. And when I was having this meeting with this specific person, they talked about how we need to be wary that that access is not conflated with the same as influence, and that not always being invited to speak at these events, or having opportunity to speak at these events, or even having one-on-one access with government officials or key people who can drive change, is not necessarily always going to result in influence in policy, influence in driving behavior, influence in even individual behavior. And so how do we really be kind of careful about committing to things just because it seems like it's giving us access, but being aware of the fact that it might not result, or it might not translate into core action, right? And sometimes what that means is that you and I, and I know a lot of other people in our network, have been invited for, even in the past, we've been invited for surveys about different things where we become a key demographic and we provide key valuable insight. But then again, is that actually creating influence in how organizations are being structured or how policy is created? So it's a very kind of broad thought. It's not as specific as I usually kind of think about, but it's starting to give me some good pointers of places where I need to maybe say no, if I recognize that what I am bringing to that organization or that entity or that group is that I'm the token brown person, token Asian person, token woman, like in the room, and how do we make sure that we're not actually used as that, and that if we are there, we need to make sure we can push for influence. And I think that's also giving me some more confidence to kind of push for some more change. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a really interesting thought, and also something that I wanted to like even ask a follow-up question of, like, how I think sometimes obviously I don't think I equate visibility as like and representation as a participation or influence either. And I think that we know in theory that isn't necessarily equal, right? And I think at the same time, it's also quite difficult then to say, does visibility not have any impact on how people actually foresee or people estimate their own space? As I think as simple as, like, if we grew up watching a female leader actually do a great job, or even just seeing them on TV, for instance, or on mass media, even if they were there, unfortunately for the tokenism's sake, there is like an indirect impact that has had on people's perspective of like what's possible for them, right? And I think that's something that we obviously are on the same page with. And at the same time, I think personally it's then hard for me to then say, when am I being tokenized and when am I not? And are we, you know, and I think that was gonna be like one follow-up question that I wanted to ask of like, was there something that you heard, like, you know, from your conversation with the person of like, was there any insight that the person has shared on how to discern that of like where, you know, the access can be actually can lead to influence? Are they like, what are some of the pointers? How do we gauge that or discern that?
Yeah, I think I opened my notes as you said this because I wanted to kind of refer to the notes. And I think the one thing that was kind of interesting is that, and they talked about, we were talking about building movements, and that's where we specifically spoke about access and influence, because we were talking about climate change, and we were talking about COP26, and this person had just come back from COP. And what was interesting is we were talking about how there's a lot of youth representation. Like I'm seeing a lot of youth that attend COP events, and they're actually showing up, and there's protests, and there's the Fridays for Future movement as well. At least in Europe, I've seen like a huge presence of that. And so there's a ton of just people that are getting access to government offices and, you know, government meetings, and they're making speeches, and they make interventions where they talk about climate change. And they you know, you've heard Greta Thunberg speak in the past, where it's really powerful, right? And I agree with you that it does make an impact in my life and many other young people, and even younger generation who are growing up and thinking that's an idol, right? Like that's an idol to follow, which is not something that we grew up necessarily seeing. We didn't really hear as much about youth leader when we were growing up. And so in that context, we were talking about it. And one of the things this person said is that there is, in building movements, one should, and I think the advice was quite specific on movement building, one should not conflate the two, is kind of what their advice was, right? So you shouldn't, you know, conflate, if you are running, let's say a climate movement, getting access to a COP26 meeting where there are cameras and you have, you know, 5 minutes of fame, don't conflate that with influence. Your work starts after and before that 5 minutes, right? And I think that's where I think it's not mutually exclusive, and we shouldn't necessarily always say no, for sure. There are some moments where I think we should, if it's very clear that this is like we're being brought into a room to make it look like it's a diverse room, we should probably say no. Right. However, most of the times I think they're not mutually exclusive. And something that they said, which was really interesting, is that then how do you turn that access into influence, is by building a well-organized movement. And there's such a strong value in well-organized movement where you have the backup of your constituency. And they gave me a specific example from our work. They said, if you were trying to create a gender policy or some kind of a specific policy in a coffee producing community or country, if you and your co-founder, who are not from Costa Rica, not necessarily producing coffee, don't necessarily meet most of the demographics, go to a government office and speak about this issue, you are a lot less likely to be taken seriously, even though you might have access. However, now if you have a team that is made up of coffee producers and primarily smallholder women, or even better, you go there with a group of smallholder women coffee producers who then talk about their experience, that is a lot more powerful, right? And there's some value in that organization of like a well-led movement that can then push the needle forward than if you just go to a room and just present and consider that like 5 minutes of fame, kind of, you know, pat on your back, and then you go home and hope that that influences. So that's one of the reflections. That there's a ton that we can unpack, but I know we don't have the time. But yeah, it's a good question, and I'm still kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was, yeah, it's super insightful, and I think there's a lot that I'd like to also unpack personally, and then maybe we can chat about it later. Yeah, and to kind of like moving, like I just have like one more question before we could close this month's coffee chat, to make sure that we are not like, you know, making like a 40 minutes or 1 hour long video. This is about, you know, the last bit of your personal note on authentic storytelling, and, you know, your reflection generally about storytelling. And they started with, you know, your, I guess, like admiration for the Obama's family and then the fellowship opening up. But then I think the gist or the core of that note was about you maintaining that sense of authenticity through storytelling. And that's something that I think I have been reflecting a lot on more recently, because I think, as you spoke earlier, we have been presenting more about our work more recently than I think ever before. And there were times where, on a regular week, I think probably like last week or 2 weeks ago, where both of us were, presenting in like multiple occasions. And there was one day where I was speaking about binge watch twice a day in an official setting. And at one point you start losing yourself and wonder, did I say this already? Am I repeating myself? Or am I, is this actually as interesting to the audience? It is, it used to be for me, because I myself am losing, I'm losing myself in the midst of story, right? So I thought it was quite interesting that you brought that up, of like, about the authenticity in storytelling, and how do we not lose that sense. So can you like, reflect a little bit or unpack a little bit more about what you wrote there about authentic storytelling and what's actually on your mind regarding that?
For sure. I think it's very, very similar to what you were saying. Like, now that we're presenting a bit more, there's a little bit more of storytelling. And I think for me, authentic storytelling has been something that I've almost struggled with a little bit, because, and I know we've both kind of struggled at different times with this, because there's no linear story, right? There's no like this happened and then this happened and this had, or everything kind of happens at different times. And there's a lot of overlap between different stories. And so when someone asks me, what's my story, it's hard for me to say kind of this one basic story. And so last week I was sitting down with my partner, and we were talking about this amazing opportunity that came out, by the way, which I hope people will consider applying to. It's called the Obama Foundation Fellowship, and it's a wonderful Obama Scholars Program, I think. And it's a wonderful program. It's a 1-year leadership training. And it's perfect for anyone that is kind of early stage career, that's looking to kind of make a dent and wants the physical kind of training, but some more backing from the foundation as well. So wonderful initiative all around. And I was thinking about applying. In the last couple of years, I've every single year looked at the application, and I've never applied, because every time I look at the stories of everyone that's involved, I also look at the story of the Obamas, which they have a wonderful story. Both Michelle and Barack have wonderful stories that they tell about their journeys. So I know that storytelling is such a key part of the foundation and the founders, and obviously the other fellows. And when I sit down to write my own story, I have like 6-7 lines of stories that I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking about like my growing up childhood, my journey of being voyage, my journey of like education and Quaker institution. So there's a lot of these stories that come into mind, and I struggle to really connect the dots and create a thread as beautifully as I've seen like the Obamas have done, or like a lot of the fellows whose stories I've read on their website. And so it's been this is the 3rd year, I believe, of like this application opening up. And I kind of am challenging myself to conquer that fear and get the courage to really just submit whatever comes up. The deadline's on the 22nd of December. And so for anyone watching, you can hold me accountable. But my goal is to just submit and see what happens. Maybe it doesn't, maybe the story that I have is that I don't have one story, and that these multitudes of stories make me who I am today. And that is okay. So that's kind of where my train of thought is around the storytelling idea. And I'm still learning. So if anyone has ideas on how to better compose something like this, I think I'll be definitely excited to learn. But that's what's on my mind.
And I wonder the challenge right now, or the personal conflict or struggle that you're currently having, is because we define authenticity to be one thing of like, I think oftentimes we confuse ourselves. It's something that I'm just constantly like right now thinking about, of like confuse ourselves between authenticity and the rawness of like how we need to tell the story just like how it happened. Like, not a single details can be misperceived or misseen, misheard or whatsoever. But then I think life isn't that way, right? Like I think on a daily basis, even if we are experiencing the same moment, we might be actually capturing or retaining different elements of that moment. Like, very moment that we're sitting together, I might not be like, I might be noticing something different in your background versus you around your surrounding and so forth. And I think maybe that authenticity doesn't necessarily have to be, just the complete correctness, but more of like what speaks dearly to your heart, right? Like what struck your chord at the time that you're experiencing it. And I know like you're a great storyteller, so I'm really excited for you as you start that writing process, and look forward to reading a little bit more on that as you write that part. And that also gave me a project to do for the 2 weeks off that I have, I guess we all have in December, to actually start writing a little bit more about what is our story, or what's my individual story. Because I think I also get myself, I think recently I've been thinking a lot about what's actually what's my story. And I think immediate reflection that I've had right after reading your personal note was also about like, what's my story. So I hope this is kind of an invitation, as you have already extended, to everyone watching it, to spend maybe a few days or a few hours at the end of the day today, or towards the end of this year, to reflect a little bit more about what's your story. And I don't think there's any better time to do it before beginning of the new year. So yeah, thank you so much.
No, I'm glad, and I'm glad that you're going to be doing it. Maybe we can revive our writing group, our writing guild, and share again.
I know. Yeah. Anyway, with that note, was there anything else that you wanted to share before we close today?
No, I'm excited. I think it's the 11th month, and it's been really fun doing this. Like, I don't know, frankly speaking, I don't know how many people watch this, how many people necessarily follow this every month, but I do find it helpful to like sit down once a month, not talk about strategy, fundraising, sales, nothing. It's just let's chat about something that's going on in our mind. So I'm glad that we've been doing it almost for 2 years. I think we started in April of 2020. So it's almost 2 years of running this, and I'm glad that it's kind of a consistent in the most uncertain of times. Nice to have something that's being consistent.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Yeah, likewise. And I think, it's been a pleasure. I think especially we try to keep it as raw as possible. And oftentimes I think we don't cut out things that we say wrong or whatever, because I think we believe in the beauty of capturing that moment the way it is. And if it's something that we don't obviously believe in the future, we can always come back to it and make a statement to correct ourselves. But then I think there's definitely value in recording the way we are at this point, with what we are struggling with, what we are celebrating. So thanks for creating this space to all of you watching it, and also like to you, Abhi, for creating this and making this possible. So with that, we will close for the month. Thank you so much for joining once again, and we look forward to seeing you once again next year, or next month actually, before we close the 2021 strong.